I literally made 20 grand more revenue 5 months later.
Amazing. 10
Um,
grand a month to 30 grand a month in 5 months.
right. I just can't really imagine like why you wouldn't do it. If you're like, oh, it's expensive. Not really. I genuinely don't think this program can cost money. It costs money if you don't do anything.
Something to Kate that I thought was really cool, which was like, I only watched 20% of the modules, but I had this massive return on investment because
Oh,
a
well,
lot
that's
of,
true. It isn't even like a Weight Watchers kind of thing where it's like, well, the program's good, but only if you follow it exactly right. I didn't even follow it that well, and I, I did really
yeah,
well. So
yeah.
you guys were really interested in my practice and like
Yeah, we were.
my
We still
focus. You were
are.
like, you do what? And I was like, because you have to understand, like, I was overwhelmingly getting told, don't do this. I think it'd be harder to find reasons not to do it. I have colleagues that I refer to, and I got them through the program. And that's another part of the program that, like, I said nothing about, but the forum, the connections. You know, if people are like, wow, I really just can't come up with the money, borrow it. I think you could have a different kind of career if you're doing this program, not just like, oh, I made my money back. You know?
Hello, David. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
So,
happy to.
people know me. My name's Alana Miller, MD. I'm a psychiatrist. I have my own private practice, and I have a program that David's in called Dream Practice Academy, where I teach other psychiatrists and psych MPs how to build their integrative psychiatry private practices. And David, can you give like a little intro to you, like where you live, what your credential is, a little bit about the practice that you have, your niche?
Yeah, so I'm a psych nurse practitioner, and before that, I was in the English department at Penn State University, so I got a PhD in English. I run Quirkiatry in Nashville, Tennessee, so it's a practice specializing in ADHD and autism, and that's, primarily what I see, but there's also a fair amount of OCD and a lot of LGBTQ plus folks.
Yeah, you have a really interesting practice niche. I think that's part of why you're successful. Like, and we'll talk about that maybe a little
Hmm.
bit later, but it's very specific. You have unique experience in it and you've got like a really great practice set up. So what was your situation that you first like came across my stuff and then even were considering doing the program?
It was actually way before I bought into it. I think I was still in school and I came across your website, I'm almost sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just terrified. I was like, this just seems like a lot. Because like you have to keep in mind, like I'm a nurse practitioner and in Tennessee, we're not like on the best terms with physicians. And so
Yeah.
a lot of stuff for psychiatrists is made to be exclusionary of NPs, like
Yeah.
insurance policies, things like that. So when
Mm-hmm.
I saw your thing, I was like, oh, that's not for me,
Mm-hmm.
even though you said I was like, oh, I don't know if it's really for me. And so I don't know, it must have been like a year later, I found you on YouTube and it's fun to listen to. Like you had a lot of confidence and I did not, So it's
Mm-hmm.
like just watch your videos like all the time and just like try to like,
Yeah, yeah.
slurp up the confidence basically. And then I was pretty much just like saving up money to be able to do it. So I think I was like 6 months into the practice by the time I actually reached out to your program.
Right. So you had already launched and you had some patients, if I recall. You were wanted to like optimize things though, optimize your marketing, optimize your systems. Was that your situation?
Yeah, I mean, I technically, was full time. Like I could support myself. I think my revenue had just hit like 10 grand the month
Yeah.
that I hired you guys. But that's saying
Yeah.
something, right? Like I just hit 10 grand. I'm like, I could do it. Like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
let's eat beanie weenies and hire Alana.
Yeah, yeah, you made it.
I was a good
So
ass move though.
tell me a little bit about that because people joining this program, here's one thing actually that would be really useful for us to talk about. A lot of people that, Kate talks to, and now I have a new member who does like the consultation calls
Hmm.
with people considering joining, Carl. One of the objections people will mention is assuming that this program doesn't work for someone who already has a practice. That it's only if you're, yeah, it's only if you're starting from scratch. Like, oh, wait, no, this doesn't apply to me. So tell me a little bit about like how you used the program and what was helpful to you, like what changed once you ended up joining.
Sure. No, I think quite the opposite. I think it'd be vastly more useful if you already had a practice because,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, I think it would be really, really overwhelming to take in, all of that information, even just like the first kind of four modules, which is like a lot of the business,
Hmm.
administration stuff, I think that'd be rough. And I could make so much more out of it, and I went so much faster because I was
Hmm.
able to, like a lot of what you were talking about was they were problems I had tried to solve,
Hmm.
and it put me in a place where I was like, well, do I like my solution or do I want to do this? Because I wasn't reliant on you for like practice in a box, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
And yeah, I mean, I thought that was great. Like I ended up for a person who had all that stuff, I switched EMRs, I went to intake queue, I switched a lot of stuff, but just based on following the modules.
So you switched EMRs. Did you switch anything else about like your softwares or systems?
Yeah, so prescribing, I think I also pruned some stuff because you have kind of an algorithm for like if you can automate it, just do that.
Yes.
If you can eliminate it, do that. I was
Yeah.
paying for a bunch of things that like I was like, I don't even need to be doing this. So I mean like I was able
Yeah.
to like cut some of my costs.
Hmm.
Like I was using some assessment tools that I was like, this is just not like QB check. I quit using that.
Uh-huh.
I started doing labs a lot more with people. I hadn't really done a whole lot of that before I started your program. So I mean it changed the practice a lot.
So it sounds like you went through some of the more advanced stuff.
Hmm.
Did you go like tell
Eventually.
me what order of even the modules? Because you could send something to Kate that I thought was really cool, which was like I only watched 20% of the modules, but I had this massive return on investment. Because
Oh, well,
a lot
that's
of
true.
yeah, yeah. A lot of people have this idea, and I agree with you, where I actually think if you have a practice and you come into the program, you're more set up to get a more immediate return on investment. Because to get a return on investment, like to make the money back that you paid into the program and more when you're just starting, there's a bunch of steps you have to go through. You have to get your business and admin set up, your minimum viable practice, you got to get the website and do the unique selling proposition and stuff. And that can take a lot of time before you can take a couple of months before you're getting your first patient in the door versus if
Hmm.
you already have a system for getting patients in the door and seeing them and you just make some tweaks to it. It's like helping steer a car that's already going 60 miles an hour versus me trying to help steer a car that's going like 2 miles an hour. And so, what was the 20% of the program that you went through? It sounds like some of the advanced stuff on advanced business systems.
Yeah, I did. So I did sort of the beginning and the end.
The beginning, then
Uh,
those are some
well,
good parts. Yeah.
well, because a lot of the stuff about integrative medicine, which is super awesome that you have to offer, just it's not what I was doing. Like I already had. It's funny, like I already had the product. What I really got out of working with you was the entrepreneurial bit. So that was the stuff that really mattered to me was more like the marketing. Like I used your script for like talking
Hmm.
to, potential new people on the phone.
Yeah.
I did that for a long time. And then, yeah, once I got to a point where I was like making decent money, then I started using the latter bits. Like I listened to your thing on like hiring an assistant and
Hmm.
should you do that? And if you do that, what are the challenges? But for me, honestly, it was like I got an immediate return on investment from just rate setting. I was already bought in. So when I talked to you that night where it was supposed to be like I'll talk you into it phone
Yeah,
call, you
yeah,
were like,
yeah.
oh, well,
Yeah, yeah, right.
I guess we could just talk. And you were
Yeah.
so funny. You were like, did you just Google the rates in your area and divide by two, like for psychiatrists? And I was like, yes.
Yeah, like was I not supposed
Well, because that's what, I'm not
to?
kidding. That's what NPs do. Like we go find whatever the psychiatrists are charging, we just divide by two. And you had the gall to ask me, you were like, are you half as good as them? And I was like,
Yeah.
well, no, because I mean, I know
Yeah, yeah.
them.
Yeah.
But, it's just, you get in your head like that. And you were like, yeah, we're going to fix that like tonight. And I
Hmm.
was so terrified. I was like, but I just thought, what was the point of joining this program if I'm not going to listen? Because I actually do know a couple people who did join the program and then they just didn't do the stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, what was the point of that? Like, so
Hmm.
I took the leap and yeah, I mean, I think I ended up spending, I mean, if we're rounding up, probably like 20 grand on the program.
Hmm. Right.
I remember having a phone call. It was the one with Kate right after talking to you, and she was like, well, what's your goal? What do you want to do? And I said, I want to make a revenue of 30 grand in 1 month. And I really thought she's gonna laugh, right?
Hmm.
Because I mean, that's the three times what I was making.
Hmm.
And she goes, yeah, okay. What else? And I was like, and I'm sitting there thinking that's never gonna happen, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
It happened 5 months later.
Amazing. 10
Um,
grand a month to 30 grand a month in 5 months.
right. And I'm almost positive I was seeing the exact same number of people.
Hmm.
You were so funny. You were like, what is this $170 psychotherapy
Yeah,
appointment? And
yeah, I can't remember.
I was like, I was in this kind of a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had all these patients for like psychotherapy, and then I was charging 170 bucks, and it was like, it was just wild. And the other experience I had that was really strange is once I went up, so I think I was charging like 200 bucks or something for an hour.
Hmm.
So when I went up to 350, I was like, it's just never going to work. Like my intake went up to 500 from like 200. But the opposite happened. I started telling people like I'm an expert in autism and ADHD. And then I would say, and it's 500 bucks. And I'm not kidding. I want to say like a dozen people in pretty short order were like, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
In fact, I would have them sell it to me. Like they would say to me, well, I mean, of course you're expensive. You're specialist.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Like it wasn't
Yeah.
believable to them at those lower rates.
Exactly. This is what people I think misunderstand is that this is basic human psychology that we assume things that are more expensive are better and we assume things that are underpriced are not so good. And
Yep.
there's a middle ground, right? If you were to charge like $5,000 for a visit, then yeah, that's going to be hard for most people to swing
Right.
and they're going to maybe not be able to do that. But undercharging, you actually hurt your marketing because especially if the price setting strategy is I'm just going to charge half of what a psychiatrist is charging. Then that puts into the other person's mind that your half is good. And that's not true at all. You actually already had, this
I
pre-existing
know.
specialization that you just
I know.
weren't leveraging. And so we just did some tweaks in terms of making sure you sold that properly. It's not selling, like communicated accurately what you were already doing. And then by charging more, I'm sure you experienced this, maybe you can speak to it if you did, getting patients into the practice who valued more what you had to offer, like did what you recommended, followed your treatment plans, like took the process seriously, showed up to appointments.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, I really thought surely these, patients are going to be more difficult or kind of more uppity or I don't know, at the higher rate. And that was just 100% not true. Like the ones that I've brought in at that rate, they almost never bring it up. The only
Mm-hmm.
time I've really gotten people bring up the rate is when they're like, they got a divorce or something happened, they
Mm-hmm.
can't afford it anymore. But they weren't going to be able to afford 170 either or whatever. When it was the lower rate, I would have people like negotiating with me, like from appointment to appointment. I'd get a lot of conversations about sliding scale. You talked at one point pretty early in the program about value conscious versus cost conscious.
Right.
And I think that's an important distinction, right? Like, I mean, and I'll say with great confidence now to people who are like, you're pretty expensive. I'm like, compared to what? Vanderbilt?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you've been going to Vanderbilt for 10 years and your ADHD is just as bad as it's ever been. That seems
Yeah.
very expensive to me.
Right.
Whereas like I can actually help you. That you do have to back it up though. And that
Yeah.
comes through in your program too, is like if you want to charge these rates and you want to position yourself as really, really good, like Mercedes doesn't get away with what they're doing because their car is just a Ford with
Right.
different branding. Like it actually does have to be somewhat
Yeah,
better.
absolutely. And I encourage people to charge just outside of their comfort zone, not like
Hmm.
wildly outside of it. I mean, it kind of actually depends on the person.
Oh,
If I can
totally.
tell someone's vastly undercharging, or like in there was a
Right.
massive mismatch between your skill set and what you were charging.
Yeah.
Other people, I might have them have more modest fees, but have it be more than they're comfortable with because it gives you like that a little internal pressure to improve, like to
Oh,
study, to
100%.
get better, versus if you're just like showing up to a job, seeing people every 15 minutes, writing Zoloft 1,000 times a day, what's the pressure to really be better? You're paid the exact same amount, whether you're average or amazing and exceptional
Yep.
versus practice. In a private practice, you can charge a little bit more, use your raising your fees as that internal incentive to improve.
Yeah, and I remember you saying something about competition also, where you were talking about how, there's just way too many patients. Like, there's no need for us to have this scarcity mindset where we're
Yeah,
like, oh, well, if you get a patient, then I didn't. Because, if you find someone who's really firing on all cylinders and you're really jealous of their practice, that's good. Like, figure
exactly.
out what
Yeah.
they're doing so you
Hmm.
can do the same thing, or that you could in your own version of it, right? Because I
Right.
remember you were saying,
Absolutely.
like, if I see this person who's charging 1,000 an hour, I want to know like
What they
how
did,
are
how
you
they
doing
did
that?
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly. I'm
what
not
classes did you
mad.
yeah, I want to, what are you mad about? And
Yeah,
also
yeah.
that person is helping you, right? Because they're normalizing that rate by charging it. You know, like
Exactly.
everybody who does it is helping each other. But people don't come into this from, I mean, I'm sure medical school and residency can feel very competitive. I know nursing school is certainly that way. It can be hard to feel like these other people in private practice are in some way useful to me or helpful to me. But that helped a lot with seeing it as more like, oh, let me reach out to these people and be like, I want to know how to do what you do, you know?
Hmm.
That's helped me
Yeah.
a lot in town.
Let me ask you, like, because it sounds like in terms of the benefit that you had in the program, part of it is the actual material that you learned, kind of going through the modules, optimizing your
Right.
systems. Part of it was just, though, getting the encouragement to do something and then doing it. Like, what do
Mhm.
you think if you would like drill it down to the top 1 to 3 things that made a difference for you being in the program? What would that be?
So for me, just your audacity, and like being able to kind of stand behind you for a while. I cannot tell you how many times I said, well, Alana said blah, 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 blah. And that would get my husband off my back. There just somebody would
Hmm.
be like, I'd
Yeah,
say, oh,
yeah.
I've got this practice consultant in LA and she says
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
yeah, yeah.
And that, you know, but also just giving me the confidence to be like, well, but really, right? I mean, I think a lot of us are coming from, unfortunately, a place of intellectual docility. Like, school generally is about do what everybody else is doing and do it
Hmm.
really, really well and for somebody's approval, right? So when you come
Yeah.
out of school and you're like, oh, I am now the person whose approval I'm working for, it's overwhelming, right? And so for you to have like a thing that's like, no, 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 just do these modules and stick with it, and the
Hmm.
confidence that you had, that helped me a lot with the doubt that comes in the beginning. Because you had
Hmm.
this cool video that was helpful to me in the beginning about like the sort of phases of a practice.
Yeah.
So that beginning, that's like the abject terror or whatever, you know, like,
Yeah. 0 to 3 months, crippling terror.
yeah,
Three to
yeah,
six months, moderate anxiety.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
6 to 12 months, early confidence. 12 plus months, cruising.
Yeah, and so like that's about right. So I think helping a person through that first 6 months is super duper valuable. Like it's just anxiety. You know, obviously the money bit. I mean, you know, I bought a whole bunch of business books that I wouldn't have, like Buy Back Your Time and
Hmm.
Book Yourself Solid, you know, a bunch of these things. So the entrepreneurial bit was really important. But honestly, I'd say the third thing that is such a big part of my brand
Hmm.
is, you know, positioning yourself like an expert and
Hmm.
having confidence in yourself and being like, you know, that what I'm doing is good and important and different. And, you know, the unique selling proposition worksheet was really helpful.
Yeah. Do you know what I really love about that? Because, first of all, the people reviewing it, I review it, but also Kate and Uni on my
Hmm.
team review it, and they're not doctors, right? They more have like a patient mindset. And
Right.
I find that clinicians sometimes forget what's so special about them. It's like you take you for granted. You forget like what's
100%.
unique. You don't realize you because you just do it, you just know it. And versus in the program, what we can do is, oh, we've worked with 250, 280, however many people are in it now, practitioners so far. We've never seen this before, or this is really uncommon. This is really unique. And we can help you pull out the parts that you may not be recognizing are special or unique or important to patients. And so then you can just position that more effectively, on the website, or even when you're having a verbal conversation with patients or talking to other practitioners who might send you referrals about what you do.
Well, and you definitely did that for me, where like you guys were really interested in my practice and like
Yeah, we were.
my
We still
focus.
are.
You were like, you do what? And I was like, because you have to understand, like in town, I was overwhelmingly getting told, don't do this. Or if you're going to do it, you're doing
Yeah.
it wrong. You know, the first version of my business was called Integrative Behavioral Health. That means
Mm.
nothing. I mean, that's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
that might as well be called middle of the road nothing, right? And, you know, now it's quirkiatry, right? Like it's
It's
from
an
the
awesome
name,
name.
you know, it's some weird thing, right? And then you go to my website, and my website's out of the world.
Hmm.
And at least you know, okay, this guy has a really sharp thing, whatever this is. Like he
Yeah.
has a very individuated sense of himself and his practice. That's been
Hmm.
really helpful. So many people have told me like they come to the website and just that kind of hero image of I've got this like pink-haired kid who's kind of like world weary.
Yeah,
But
we'll link it to it in the description of this video.
but yeah, they right away are like, oh, okay, done. Like they just know right away. Like, and that was in your you know, your website guide was like, make sure like from above the fold, like they get
Yeah.
what is this, but also just having the gall again to like show up to a board meeting of whatever and be like, yeah, I am the guy. Yeah,
It's
that's
funny.
me.
I've had other people say that whenever I'm talking to people and they've had a good experience in the program, I'm like, well, what helped you? Like, because it helps me just to know which part. I built so many things,
It's so
which
much
was
stuff.
like,
Yeah.
which is the part that made a difference for you. And several people have said that to me. It was just getting to borrow my confidence,
Oh, 100%.
because I think I genuinely believe I'm like, yeah, you can do it. I just believe in everyone. And I think that helps sustain people when they have inevitable self doubt in the process.
Your story, though, was important. The stuff that really spoke to me in the beginning was watching videos about where you started with your practice or like the trouble you had with, not being able to finish residency because of
Mm-hmm.
cancer. And like one of the real big cornerstones of my practice is letting patients see me fail or flub or struggle or whatever, because my shtick is ultimately Quirkiatry's authenticity, right? And so I have autism, I have ADHD. So people come and they're like, oh, this guy, right? It feels really bad when you have perfectionism and rejection sensitivity to be with a clinician who seems perfect. And
Yeah.
I can relate to them or tell them stories about like things that I've gone through and whatever. So, when you did share that, like how it was tough in the beginning, and you'd made some choices you wouldn't make again and whatever, like that felt really good. And that feels really different from like, hey, I'm Alana Miller, check me out. I've done so well with my practice that now I'm teaching
Right.
people how to do it, and I've done super well at that. Like at some
Yeah.
point you
Yeah.
become actually not relatable anymore.
Yeah. It's interesting. I didn't think of it that way. You're
Like
right.
you're too successful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so having those videos of your old, stories and stuff, like that's really helpful because then, it's like, wait, no, no, no. I'm not where she is. I'm where she was. And maybe I could over time get there.
Yeah, it's interesting that part about maybe being less relatable because I'm farther away from, like, I just seem more successful. Like, people maybe who come across my stuff more recently don't realize, no, I had cancer twice. I had a stem cell transplant 5 years ago. I was in a
I
hospital
was
for a
like,
month.
not that long ago.
Yeah, it was not that. It was right after COVID. It was like, oh, yeah, you have at best a 50% chance of being alive in 5 years. At best, it was probably lower than that. But I think, like, even now, it's not like my life is perfect. I have struggles and stuff, but I'm very resilient. It takes a lot to rattle me. And I think that's where the confidence gets translated to others. Because even if others have struggles, I'm like, no, I wouldn't be worried if that happened to me. So I'm not worried for them either. I really, truly believe things are solvable. Everything is solvable. There's a solution for things. Humans are amazingly resilient and able to bounce back. I think that helps me in my clinical practice as well, working with patients with trauma and PTSD and things like that, of their own
Yeah. I mean, they'll
difficulties.
pick
And
it up on
also,
you.
yeah, on this program too.
Yeah, I definitely get that.
I was going to ask, I'm kind of going out of order of my questions here, but you mentioned earlier something that I thought was interesting that I wanted to dial in a little bit more. You mentioned that you know some Psych MPs who have done my program and not done the things I've recommended. When you see people who are not successful, why do you think that is? Because if I were to generalize, I would say the people that I see struggling are often more the Psych NPs, but to me, I still think it's internal barriers rather than
Oh,
external
100%.
barriers. A lot of them say, no, Psych NP, the fees you tell people to charge are unrealistic. This wouldn't work in my geographic area. It's not like you're in Los Angeles or something. So, but what do you think is the reason some people, including people maybe in the program, struggle when they try to do this and it doesn't work?
Yeah, so first of all, if you're a nurse practitioner, get over it. Like nobody knows what that means. Nobody has any idea. I've got a white coat on the back of my door. That's terrifying to my patients. Like nobody has any idea. And there's so much alphabet soup in mental health anyway. Like they're going and seeing social workers and counselors and psychologists and PTs and OTs and you just one more thing. Like all they care about is are you any good? And you don't get to hide behind your letters or any of that. No, it's totally internal barriers. Like med school doesn't make a person into some other thing. You went into it afraid of your own shadow. You're going to come out of it afraid
Yeah,
of your own shadow. I think some of what I've seen with the people is I think they wanted somehow the program to do everything for them. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like I think they were thinking it was going to be like they could just kind of passively have success come to them.
Hmm.
And if anybody ever starts selling that, let me know because I'll line
Yeah,
up.
yeah, I'd like to buy it. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, there's a reason that like, there's not a whole lot of that out there, right? Like I think it's just internal fear and doubt, you know.
Yeah, and we were talking about this a little bit before we hit record about where you were joking, you thought that people might just think, I paid
Oh,
you
that I'm a
to be
shill,
talking.
yeah.
Yeah, that you're a shill and stuff like that. I did not pay him to be here. He volunteered, which I really appreciated. But also, it's like people, I think, assume someone recording a video like this is the best of the
Oh,
experiences. You know what I mean?
right, right, right. Like
And so
I'm top of the class.
yeah, you're top of the class. It's not representative of what maybe
Yeah.
their experience would be like. And that's why I do want to speak honestly about when people struggle, whether it's doing it on their own or in the program, why is it? So someone watching this can think, oh no, I get that. I know I would have to do the work. I'd be willing to do things that make me uncomfortable. We do an annual survey. I don't know if you filled it out, like
I
with
did.
people in the program, because I genuinely want this to be the best program that's ever
Yeah.
existed. So I'm always trying to improve it. And our NPS score is really high, net promoter score. It's like people rate 1 to 10 how much they would be
Oh,
likely
right. Yeah,
to
yeah.
recommend you. And I think our average is 9, which is extremely high
Yeah.
for anything. But there's
Yeah.
like a few threes in there. It's like a lot of tens and then two,
Sure.
a small handful of people who didn't
God, I
have a
would
good
love to meet
experience.
those people.
They're nice people.
I just want to know how it happened. Like what happened?
Yeah, no, I actually want to too. I kind of want to maybe just do one-on-one, have a conversation because I genuinely want to understand what was the obstacle. Maybe we can build out program content or improve things to deal with that. But I think, and if I'm understanding what you're saying too, I think it's like they give up too soon. They think it's going to be less work. It's a lot of work. It's
Yeah, it is a lot of work.
if you just do the work, you will get the result. But yeah, it's
Yep.
not like you just do 3 things. Like, give us a sense when you were with those couple of months, maybe both prior to joining the program when you were building the practice on your own, but also after you joined and you were improving things. Like, how many hours a week were you putting into not just the clinical care and admin related to clinical care, but like practice growth stuff?
I know. I wish I had a good answer to that. I don't have kids or hobbies, so I'm pretty monomaniac about it. I
Mm-hmm.
think I was putting in a lot of time. I mean, I would love to say something about like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I will say when it comes to like just straight up marketing kind of stuff or like biz dev stuff, that I actually didn't put nearly as much time
Mm-hmm.
into. So like to your point, I would not be a straight A student in Dream Practice Academy. Like I did probably 30-40% of the content. I listened to most of it, meaning followed it, but
Yeah.
I could have done way, way more. I mean, I remember you talking about like, every day you need to be doing like an hour of marketing and like I always get in my head you saying like, why don't you go, email 100 therapists and see if you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
get a referral, right?
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, I'm not emailing 100 therapists. Like, um, so all of that is to say, like, it isn't even like a Weight Watchers kind of thing where it's like, well, the program's good, but only if you follow it exactly right. I didn't even follow it that well, and I I did really
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
anything, I'm actually now trying to like go back through your
Go
stuff and
back.
be like, well, because it's different at different places. Like if you're in a
Totally.
survival mindset, you're just in a different place. I would say honestly though, admin growth, the whole thing. 15 hours. I mean,
Yes.
it's a lot,
Mhm.
but it's not as much as like, people over at Vanderbilt seeing patients, they're doing that for 12 hours and they're seeing like 20 people, so
Yeah, yeah, right. Yes, exactly. It's not a crazy amount of time, especially if
no.
you're probably only seeing patients part-time on the
Well, and I
often with
had time. Yeah. It's not like I was
yeah.
drowning in patients.
And so, but then I think if someone comes into it thinking, I'm just going to put in like 30 minutes a day, it's like not going to be realistic. Or I think the other thing I see people do is they'll put in a bunch of hours and not see an immediate benefit. And then, oh, this isn't going to work and just stop. But you have to stick with it long enough to see like the compound interest of your efforts. I always show this chart of like Warren Buffett's net worth over
Yeah.
time. It's like flat, 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 shoo, because that's what exponential growth is. And I think exponential growth also applies to effort, where,
Oh,
yeah, in the
100%.
beginning, you put in all this effort and then it takes a little bit of time to see the returns from that. But that's how anything worth building is like.
Yeah. And you also just can't be results oriented.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you saying like when you're doing your marketing stuff, especially like 99 out of the 100 things that you do are going to fail. and it is what it is. Like you're not doing it so that they all work. You're doing it for the one that works, you know?
Hmm.
And that marketing in particular, which if we're being serious with a practice like this, like that's following your model, ultimately marketing is the blood of the thing. Like if you can't articulate why patients should come to you and work with you, I think you can have a hard time in private practice at all.
Yeah.
But certainly, you know, at higher rates. But then also like, who wants that life? You know, like who wants to be
Hmm.
walking around going, well, people come to me because they have to, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, right.
so I don't know, I think people can get a lot of success out of it by even just like sticking to the bits that they do. Like, because that is one thing. Anything I did, I stuck with it. So even if I only did like 40% of the modules or whatever, I then, you know, kept that
Saw
going.
through. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't like roll back on, I did see, I know at least one person who did this who did roll back their rates. And I'm like, well,
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah, that's the other thing where when I see people aren't successful, they struggle. They maybe decide, oh, I'm going to lower my rates or I'm going to credential with insurance, even though that wasn't my original plan. And they don't reach out for help. I don't even find out till maybe like after the fact. Wait, why didn't you let me know you were struggling? Why didn't you, we could have, addressed it? Why didn't you come to a call? The program is set up that the resources are there, but you have to use them and you have to like let us know, let me or my team know if there's an issue and you need like the person needs additional support. So that's good to know that that was your experience. Like, yes, you didn't do everything, but the things you did do, you like kept going, even though you did go through the emotional roller coaster during the process.
Yeah, and I will say, I think it would be incredibly hard for people starting a practice to know what the return on investment was because they have no basis for comparison. Like when I
Yeah.
already had my practice, I can literally tell you with dollars, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
here's how much I was charging, here's how much I charged after you. If we just keep that going, here's the difference, right? And that is to say, like, also with the modules and like the advice you're giving and stuff, you have to stick with that because it's a lot of what you give also is like interwoven, right? Like the different
Hmm.
pieces kind of rely on each other. So I did find when, you know, my ADHD brain wanted to like skip stuff, I would
Hmm.
end up having to go back to do it because I'm like, oh, okay, there's a reason she wanted it
Yeah,
done
yeah.
this way.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Put
know?
in order for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't fault people for wanting to spend the least amount of time and the least amount of money, but like I would say, you know, this is certainly how I felt about it. Like if a person's watching one of these videos, like they're already dedicating their free time to
Yeah.
business development, right? So they're already making a decision, even by watching this stuff, that they're going to carve out some amount of time. They're not just going to survive and do the minimum, right? A procrastinator struggles with
Hmm.
follow through. Oh, and also the way that your program is structured, that, you know, I got like a roadmap. I think it was literally
Hmm.
called that in the
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah. Premier tier. Yeah. We give a
Yeah. And
roadmap.
yeah. And so like, you know, the help is there.
Yeah, for people watching, because we have three different tiers, you did the premier tier, our highest tier. So you did, you and I did an initial call. You did quarterly calls with Kate. We created a roadmap for you, like a Google
Right.
Doc where we have check boxes. Do these things in this order. Here are the timeline. So that's good for people who, yeah, either have ADHD or just want extra accountability or just want that kind of customized plan, which I think anyone who has an existing practice and joins the program, to me, Premier Tier is the one that makes the most sense because when someone has an existing practice, that's where we want to be able to customize the optimization plan as much as possible because starting a practice that's kind of always about the same, you go through the same
Right.
process, but when someone has a practice there's different things that we might recommend optimizing in different orders, and so it can be good to be able to create like a customized plan of how we would optimize someone's individual practice.
Well, and that's why like I've always referred to, I mean, I always refer to the program by you, right? Because you're like the face of the program, but I'll refer to this as like my practice consultant, you know?
Yeah.
And is it really? No, it's a self-guided course, right?
Hmm.
But that's what it felt like, man, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, because there is some consulting involved. Like I got pretty direct feedback from you guys when I needed it in the beginning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think if you've got a practice already, I mean, I would go for the most help you can get.
Yeah, I was just curious of factors that could lead to someone being successful because you have been super successful. And I want to understand like what factors were most important. So I'm going to say a factor, and I want you to tell me from 1 to 5 how important you think that was in your success. 5, incredibly important, 1, not important at all.
Okay.
So, number 1, psychological slash mental mindset, confidence, resilience, adaptability.
Oh, 5. Yeah.
I think so too. Talking to you, I'm like, oh yeah, that's why he was successful. And I think that's where people who weren't struggle. Okay, next one. Work ethic and effort.
4? I mean, you
4.
do have to
Okay.
do it, but you know.
Yeah. I get the sense you've got a pretty good, like you're, when you decide to do something, you're pretty focused. Not that you spend like 100 hours a week doing it, but you're relatively diligent. Okay. What about networking and referral sources, like particular access to certain networking referral sources, maybe from Vanderbilt or other places nearby?
So for me, it was 5. I live entirely
Okay.
off referrals. I don't get anything from Psych today, and I don't get randoms just finding the website usually.
And for those referral sources, were they pre-existing or did you
Mm-mm.
develop them after being in the program? Okay.
Yep.
Next one, geographic location.
I don't think that matters a whole lot for my practice, especially because, what you're teaching in the program is like a telehealth practice. So like
Hmm.
anybody in the state, I haven't found that mattered a huge amount. I think people could be kind of anywhere and probably do fine with your program.
So is your practice, are your patients kind of all over the state or they tend to be closer to like Nashville or
No, no, no. They're mostly in Nashville because I have a
okay.
physical location. But
Okay.
I think it's something like 20% of my appointments are still telehealth,
Got it. Okay.
you know.
So geography, we'll say like a 2.5 for you maybe.
Sure.
That's just my my number.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one, and I think this is relevant to you, niche or specialization. To what degree do you think your success is because you have this expertise in this niche?
5.
5, I think so too. Yeah, I was gonna say I
Yeah.
think it's your mindset and I think it's your niche, like were the two
Yeah,
main things.
for sure.
And then last one, luck or timing. Do you think luck or timing was any aspect of it?
Yeah, but honestly, I would say like luck favors the prepared. So,
Hmm.
honestly, I'd put a 1. I mean, like, I think because it's
Yeah.
one of these things where it's like, stuff happens and then you think it was lucky, but it's just because you were plugging away, But I think
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
say the times in my life when I've believed in luck more, I think I was more disenfranchised.
Yeah, because you needed it. You're like, I just need something, I need
Yeah.
some miracle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or I wasn't feeling my own agency or whatever. Like I
Yeah.
don't feel lucky most of the time. I think most of the time I feel like, no, I did that. Like if I want something to happen, I'm gonna make it happen.
No, exactly. Like, but luck favors people who don't give up, who give themselves a chance to have fortuitous things happen.
Yeah, and it's just statistics, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
you take more shots, you make more
exactly.
shots. Like,
That's a really good way to put it. What
mhm.
would you say to someone watching this who's maybe kind of a similar situation or considering the program, maybe like on the fence if they like believe this can work for them, whether or not it would make sense for them to join? What would you say to someone in that situation?
Well, I just can't really imagine like why you wouldn't do it. Like, so first of all, if you're like, oh, it's expensive, right? Not really, right? I think one of the things that's hard for a person who isn't used to owning their own business is spending money on things that make money,
Yeah.
right? Like, I genuinely don't think this program can cost money. Like, it costs money if you don't do anything, but like,
Yeah.
we're talking about like I literally made 20 grand more revenue 5 months later. So I like paid the whole thing off that month
Yeah.
if you think
Yeah. Yeah.
about the difference, right?
Right.
So yeah, the
And you can
money,
have your career for decades.
well,
Like,
that's the other thing. Like, I mean, it's paid off, the first year. So like I've
yeah,
got a
yeah.
long time. It's to your point, right? It's like, you know, I had a boat going and you like tapped it. Well, the longer it goes, right, the more of a difference that's going to make. So, and there's other people where there's no boat to tap. Like they need you just to start.
Hmm.
The other thing I would say though is like it's also a good practice. The protocols are good. Just because I didn't use them doesn't mean they're not good. Like I already
Hmm.
had a thing I was doing. The clinical information is valuable and solid. Like you do believe in good clinical practice and not working outside your expertise. And yeah, I think it'd be harder to find reasons not to do it. because even if you had a practice and you were like, it was going well and it was homebrew, you made it up, I still think there's value in doing the program to see like, okay, well, here's a different way that I could have done it. Am I still happy with the choices that I made, right? It'd be
Hmm.
sort of like hiring, again, like a practice consultant, but honestly, hella cheaper. A real,
Yeah.
like an actual consultant coming in. I mean, that's the
No, I've
cheapest.
talked to people joining saying they were looking at things that were like $50,000, like
Oh, 100%.
consultants. It's funny. I
Right.
was making this little Google sheet. I love Google Sheets with calculations and stuff. I was making one that we could use when my team is talking to people considering joining to like show the math of if you're transitioning from an existing insurance practice to a cash practice or improving a cash practice or from a job to either one of those practices, like understanding your current hourly rate and what you would need to make or charge in order to get the same amount of income and whatever hours in the other one. And I was like, I'm going to make a return on investment calculator of like, okay, so the cost of the program is this. And then if you save, let's say $100 a month because you get rid of some subscription, like that would be the return. If you get one extra patient a year or two extra, like whatever the number of patients, extra patients you would get, and you see them this frequency, what would you make? And it was like almost seemed unrealistic. So I was telling my team, I'm like, you got to be really judicious with the numbers or else people aren't going to believe it. But it's if you have this practice for like 30 years, if you're saving $100 a month, okay, that's $1,200 in a year. And in 5 years, that's like $6,000. And in 30 years, and that's just $100, let alone you get one extra patient a month you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Let's just imagine you get one extra patient a month. That ended up being like $8,000 a year.
Hmm.
And then you do that, like, and that to me
Yeah.
is so conservative, you know? That to me, I think when people don't join, it's fear of like taking a leap, of just like going over, it's like a little leap where you don't know exactly what's going to happen. To me, I find excitement in those types of decisions, but I think some people feel fear, and that's where they might be coming from.
No, totally. I mean, excitement and fear are like the same thing, right? It's future-oriented thinking. And in the one case, you assume good things, in the other one, you assume bad things, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, I genuinely, I don't know how you could, do poorly on this. I think, if people are like, wow, I really just can't come up with the money, borrow it. Like, especially because if you think about like my story, the ROI happens potentially pretty quickly. Like, I would be pretty surprised if most people don't make their money back in the first year. If they don't, great, but like,
mhm,
I genuinely don't think they're following the program, you know?
yeah. No, I appreciate that. Your story is awesome. And it's so great hearing that you're doing so well and that, you're enjoying your practice. That's like the goal,
Yeah.
right? You're making good money and you're feeling like you're having a big impact, a positive impact on your patients, and you're enjoying it and not like counting down the days to, when you can retire. Like, I think that's the ultimate goal. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we finish? Any other thoughts? And no worries if there's nothing else.
The other thing I would say is the program also positions you for, what comes next. So I'm at a place now where, I'm looking into like content generation and not just, using my time to see patients one-on-one and trading my time for money. Part of this push to be positioned as an expert is developing expertise. Like I am legitimately an expert on these
Hmm.
topics. So it's more than people think. Like, I think they might think that this program is about getting to a place where you can survive and do this full time. Because, you got a lot of people who they're working for somebody they want to kind of switch
Yeah.
over. That's actually pretty short-sighted. Like, that's probably going to happen faster and more easily than people think, which doesn't mean it's not important. It's just having that entrepreneurial mindset is also what's going to make you not burn out. Because, I do specialize. How many times can I treat ADHD before I'm just like, you know.
Yeah, 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 right.
But being able to think like, oh, I want like branches, that's something I'm thinking into. Like I want to open in
Oh, awesome.
Atlanta.
Yeah.
I want to open in LA. And like, what would it take to do that, even if I never do it, but just having that
Yeah, I love
confidence
that.
of like, let me let the rest of the world say no to this. Like I'm gonna work on it
Yeah.
and push it and stuff. So that's all to say, like, I think you could have a different kind of career if you're doing this program, not just like, oh, I made my money back.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I did this interview with Jess Romeo, he said something very similar, that one of the
Yeah,
big
well, he
benefits.
would.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, he's killing it. Like, it just that it was the entrepreneurial thinking that he would never have thought of going in the direction he ended up going in, and creating his own program that he's working on. If he hadn't been maybe introduced to that, oh, this is a way you can think in medicine. Like, it's okay to do this, and
Right.
there's this whole other area of possibility that you wouldn't have been introduced to in your training.
Well, and you guys introduced me to Jess Romeo, so there you go.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's
there you go. It was another win. Yeah, well, no, Kate, I remember Kate was like, we gotta connect David with just Romeo. Like,
yeah,
that
who was a
connected like
great
right away in
mentor
our
for
head.
me
Yeah.
early on.
Hmm.
Very, very important mentor for me early on. So I mean, that's another part of the program that like I said nothing about, but in fact, like the forum, the connections, I have colleagues that I refer to in LA because I've got patients from LA, and I got them through the program. And they're, lovely people who are doing a great job. My patients love them. So it goes places you don't expect, you know.
Yeah. And let me actually just end on this last question. What's it like? You kind of alluded to this earlier, like most spaces with MDs are not welcome to Psych MPs, or like it's kind of like hostile. What's the experience with, there's MDs, there's DOs, there's NPs. What's kind of it like as a Psych MP?
Well, I will say talking to you that just helped a lot with that. And, having MDs in the forums who, were asking me questions in humility. In my nursing program, I was a certain kind of person. And so they just put me in the residency with the med students. It's just sort of a temperament thing. They were like,
Hmm.
well, good luck, right?
Hmm.
So I did spend a lot of time with MDs, but again, it's like a culture thing, right? Another thing that helped was you talking in your videos about the criticisms that a psychiatrist will come under by other psychiatrists. And that's when I was like, oh, these are just haters. Like they're not even specifically
Yes.
coming after me. Like
No. Yeah,
they're
yeah.
going after their own, like they're
Yeah.
so then I was able to chill out, right? I go on studentdoctor.net and I'm like, I remember this.
Yeah, no, I can't even go on studentdoctor.net anymore. It's like I get hate. I'm like, what is with you guys?
Oh,
Get
you
over
would. You for
it.
sure would.
Yeah.
No, but I mean that happened when I told people in the area, like, oh, I'm specializing in autism and ADHD. They were like, well, you can't do that. And you're a medical provider. You got to be available to everybody. And I was like, well, you first.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. That's funny. I mean, I think actually clinical care is better when we all are seeing the patients. We are uniquely skilled, whether through our lived experience, our clinical experience, and a lot of that to be able to see. Like, I actually referred patients of mine to Jess because he had areas of
yeah.
expertise that I didn't. You know what I mean? And isn't that better to be able to kind of able to refer to colleagues who are good at the things we're not good at? It's hard to be good at everything. I'd rather be really good at what I do and then refer to my amazing colleagues who are better at the things I'm not good at.
Yeah. And I will say, like, I do think and I'm sure you've thought of this, but there's a lot of room for a more advanced version of this that's
Hmm.
like, you have a practice, how to, like, I would love to see something that's like how to scale it up to a group thing, 'cause that's what I'm trying to do now. I know Jess did a little bit of that, sort of practice of the practice kind of thing, because it's a different thing. And I know you've got thoughts, at that level
Yeah,
also.
yeah. No, on the back of my head is like what I'm going to build next. Because this has been on my mind for a while, that there's people like you who kind of went through the program. Not that you finished everything, but you've got the results. Like, you've got a really good practice and it's
Right.
cruising. And you're thinking like the next thing, what am I going to do next? And I would love to build at some point something for you guys who are in that looking forward to the next thing phase.
Yeah, and we would love it.
Yeah, you would love to have it. So thank you again so much for doing this. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you soon.
All right, thanks.
Okay, bye.